In the vast expanse of the galaxy, where civilizations rise and fall like cosmic tides, there exists a species that defies every prediction, every calculation, and every assumption made by the galactic community. They are not the strongest, nor the most advanced, nor the most numerous. Yet, when the darkness comes calling, when hope itself seems lost, and when even the mightiest empires tremble, there is only one name whispered in desperate prayers across 1,000 worlds: human. They emerge not from the light, but from the shadows where others fear to tread. They answer calls that were never meant to reach them, fight battles that were never theirs to win, and save lives that will never know their names. This is the story of one such call, one such answer. And the moment the galaxy learned that humanity's greatest weapon was never their technology or their numbers, it was their unbreakable refusal to let others suffer alone. The Xenos called for rescue. The humans answered from the shadows. What happened next would reshape the very foundations of galactic civilization. The quantum communicator crackled to life in the depths of the abandoned Theta 7 research station, its emergency frequency cutting through the cosmic silence like a blade through flesh. Dr. Zara Velta's forearms trembled as she adjusted the transmission array, her chitinous fingers dancing across controls slick with her own violet blood. Behind her, the sounds of battle drew closer: plasma fire, the screech of metal being torn apart, and the horrifying chittering of the Vrak swarm as they consumed everything in their path. "Emergency transmission on all frequencies," she whispered into the communicator, her translator struggling to convert her Kalarian words into galactic standard. "This is Dr. Zara Veltar of the Galactic Research Consortium, transmitting from Kepler 442b, Sector 7. We are under attack by unknown hostiles. The entire research facility is compromised. We have civilians trapped, including younglings. Please, if anyone can hear this." An explosion rocked the station, sending her sprawling across the communication console. Emergency lights bathed everything in an ominous red glow as the main power grid failed. Through the reinforced viewport, she could see the source of their nightmare. Thousands of black insectoid shapes swarming across the research facility's outer structures like a living shadow. The Vrak had come from the void between stars, and they consumed everything organic they encountered. Zara pulled herself upright, checking the transmission status. The signal was broadcasting on every emergency frequency she could access, but the nearest Galactic Defense Force patrol was 3 days away. The Hegemony fleet was engaged in border disputes with the Synthetic Collective. The mighty Krullian Empire had recalled their forces to deal with internal strife. Even the usually reliable Centauri Federation was stretched thin across their expanding territories. They were alone. The door to the communication center buckled inward, black ichor seeping through the gaps as something large pressed against it from the other side. Zara's breath caught in her throat as she heard the distinctive sound of Vrak bioweapons eating through the reinforced alloy. She had perhaps minutes before they broke through. "Please!" She continued her transmission, her voice barely a whisper now. "Coordinates are being transmitted with this message. We have 37 researchers, 12 support staff, and 6 younglings in the emergency shelter. The Vrak have overrun our defenses. Our security forces they're gone. All of them. If anyone is listening, if anyone can hear this, we don't have long." She closed her eyes, thinking of the children huddled in the emergency shelter 2 levels below. The youngest was barely 5 cycles old, a small Altarian girl whose parents had brought her to witness what was supposed to be the most significant archaeological discovery in galactic history. They had found something in the ancient ruins beneath Kepler 442b's surface, something that predated every known civilization by millions of years. Instead, their discovery had somehow attracted the attention of the Vrak. The door began to split apart with a sound like breaking bones. Light years away, in the darkness between stars, something stirred. Hidden in the shadow of a dead moon, a vessel that appeared on no official registry and flew under no recognized flag powered up its passive sensors. The ship was sleek and predatory, its hull a matte black that seemed to absorb light rather than reflect it. No running lights marked its presence, no identification transponders announced its purpose. Inside, a figure hunched over a console raised his head. Staff Sergeant Marcus Chen of the 3rd Marine Expeditionary Force, a unit that officially didn't exist, frowned at the display before him. The emergency transmission was fragmentary, barely coherent through the quantum interference, but the coordinates were clear enough. "Ghost Actual to Ghost Team," he spoke into his throat mic, his voice barely above a whisper. "We've got a code black in Sector 7. Civilian research station under attack by unknowns." "Copy that, Ghost Actual." came the response from Corporal Sarah Martinez in the pilot's seat. Galactic Defense Force response? Negative. Nearest GDF assets are 72 hours out. Local forces are tied up with other commitments. There was a moment of silence on the comm. Everyone aboard the ship knew what that meant. The galactic community's much-vaunted mutual defense protocols were worth less than the data they were stored on when it really mattered. When push came to shove, every species looked after their own first. "Sir," came another voice. This one belonging to Lance Corporal Jake Wilson, their technical specialist. "I'm reading 37 life signs at those coordinates, but they're fading fast. Whatever's hitting that station isn't taking prisoners." Chen stared at the tactical display, his jaw tight. The mission parameters were clear. Observe and report only. The third MEF operated in the shadows, gathering intelligence on threats the official galactic government either couldn't or wouldn't acknowledge. They weren't supposed to engage unless directly threatened. They weren't supposed to reveal themselves to protect alien civilians who had never heard of humanity and probably wouldn't care if they had. But looking at those fading life signs, Chen found himself thinking about his sister's kids back on New Tokyo. About how scared they got during thunderstorms. About how they looked to the adults around them for protection and safety. "Ghost. Actual to all stations," he said finally, his decision made. "We're going in. Full stealth approach, minimal signature. Rules of engagement are weapons free on hostiles, but we keep our identity locked down tight. As far as anyone knows, we're just another mystery in a galaxy full of them." "Sir," Wilson's voice carried a note of concern. "Command is going to have our asses if we blow operational security for a bunch of Xenos." Chen's smile was cold and sharp in the red glow of the combat lighting. "Then we better make sure Command never finds out, hadn't we? Martinez, lay in a course for Kepler. 442B, best possible speed." "Aye, sir. ETA 47 minutes at maximum burn." Back on the research station, Dr. Zara Viltar clutched a photo of her family as the communications center door finally gave way. Black chitinous shapes poured through the gap, their multifaceted eyes reflecting the emergency lighting like malevolent stars. She had stopped transmitting minutes ago when it became clear that no help was coming. The galaxy was vast, and 37 lives on a remote research station were a statistical irrelevance in the grand scheme of things. The largest of the creatures, standing nearly 3 meters tall on its 6-jointed legs, approached her slowly. Its mandibles clicked rhythmically as it studied her with alien intelligence. The Vrak were not mindless predators. They were calculating, efficient, and utterly without mercy. They had consumed entire star systems, leaving nothing but empty husks drifting in the void. "Your species will make excellent breeding stock," it said, its words translated by bio-neural interface directly into her brain. "Your young will provide necessary genetic diversity for our expansion." Zara closed her eyes and thought of the children in the shelter below. At least she had tried. At least someone, somewhere, had heard their call for help, even if no one was coming. The creature raised one razor-sharp forelimb, preparing to deliver the paralytic sting that would leave her conscious but helpless as they began the conversion process. In her final moments, Zara found herself wondering if there really was anyone out there who would have come, who would have answered their desperate call. She would have been surprised to learn that the answer was yes. 43 minutes later, the research station's passive sensors detected a gravitational anomaly approximately 1,000 kilometers from the facility. For exactly 2.3 seconds, something large displaced local space-time, then vanished again as if it had never existed. The station's automated systems logged the anomaly and promptly forgot about it, as they had been programmed to do by their mysterious attackers. In the darkness beyond the station's perimeter, 6 figures in advanced powered armor materialized like ghosts given substance. Their suits were technological marvels that made the Galactic Defense Force's standard equipment look like Bronze Age tools. Full-spectrum stealth capabilities, enhanced strength and speed, weapons that could punch through starship armor, and tactical computers that could process battlefield information faster than most species could think. But more than their technology, it was their mindset that made them dangerous. These were humans, and humans had never learned how to quit. Staff Sergeant Chen surveyed the research station through his helmet's enhanced optics, taking in the scope of the devastation. The outer structures were covered in what looked like black coral, a bioorganic substance that pulsed with an unsettling rhythm. Life sign readings showed 31 survivors still active. They had lost 6 more during the approach. "Okay, people," he whispered into his comm. "We've got Vrak infestation, approximately 2,000 hostiles spread throughout the facility. Survivors are concentrated in the emergency shelter on sub-level 2, but we've got scattered groups trapped on other floors. This is a search and rescue with extreme prejudice. Sir, Corporal Rodriguez, their medic, spoke up. Rules of engagement? Chen's answer was immediate and absolute. Anything that isn't obviously civilian gets put down, hard. The VRAC don't take prisoners, so we don't either. Martinez, you're on overwatch with the heavy rifle. Wilson, you're with Rodriguez on rescue coordination. Henderson and Torres, you're with me on direct assault. We move fast, we move quiet, and we get these people out. What about operational security, sir? Henderson asked. Our gear is going to raise questions. Let them ask questions, Chen replied. Dead civilians don't get to wonder about where their rescuers came from. The team moved through the facility with the fluid precision of a unit that had fought together through hell itself. They had trained for scenarios like this, though usually the civilians they were rescuing were human. The principle remained the same. Innocent lives were innocent lives, regardless of what species they belonged to. The first group of Vrock they encountered was feeding on something that had once been the facility's head of security. The creatures were so focused on their meal that they never noticed the 6 shadows that flowed around them like deadly smoke. 6 precisely aimed particle beams reduced the feeding cluster to component atoms before they could even register the attack. Chen's tactical display updated with enemy positions as they pushed deeper into the facility. The VRAC had been thorough. They had consumed the facility's entire security force and were systematically hunting down the research staff. But they had made one critical error. They had assumed that no help was coming. They had never faced humans before. As the team cleared the first floor, Chen found himself thinking about the intelligence briefings on the VRAC. Nomadic species, possibly extragalactic in origin. Consumed organic matter for reproduction and expansion. Technologically advanced but relied heavily on biological weapons and systems. Highly intelligent but apparently lacked any concept of mercy or negotiation. They were everything the galaxy feared most. An apex predator that saw all other life as nothing more than food. But they had never hunted humans. And humans, Chen reflected as he watched Henderson eliminate another cluster of feeding Vrock with surgical precision, were apex predators themselves. The difference was that humans had learned to care about more than just themselves. As they approached the emergency shelter where the last survivors were trapped, Chen's sensors detected something that made his blood run cold. The VRAC weren't just feeding anymore, they were converting. The organic material covering the station's walls was actually a bio-neural network, one that was rapidly integrating the station's technology with VRAC biological systems. They weren't just looking for food, they were setting up a permanent base. Sir, Wilson's voice came through the comm with barely controlled urgency. The shelter's being breached. Multiple contacts, and they're moving fast. Chen's response was immediate. All units converge on the shelter. We're out of time for subtlety. The race was on. The emergency shelter's reinforced doors were rated to withstand direct orbital bombardment, but they had never been tested against BRAC bioacid. Dr. Keth Mulvane pressed his scale back against the wall, watching in horror as the door began to dissolve from the inside out. Around him, the remaining survivors huddled together in the center of the shelter. Scientists, support staff, and the 6 younglings whose innocent presence made every adult's protective instincts flare to life. "How much longer do you think we have?" whispered Dr. Grimm. Elena Vasquez, the only human researcher on the team. She was cradling a small Alterian child who couldn't stop whimpering for her parents who had been on the surface when the attack began. "Not long enough," Keth replied, his translator converting his guttural Draknari speech into galactic standard. "The acid is designed to break down molecular bonds. Even these doors won't last more than a few minutes." Through the shelter's internal sensors, they could hear the creatures outside. The clicking of mandibles, the scraping of chitinous limbs against metal, and worst of all, the wet sounds of feeding. Dr. Vasquez held the Alterian child closer and tried not to think about what those sounds meant. "I should have listened to the warnings," muttered Dr. Sao. Sean Carell, the expedition's xenoarchaeologist. His forearms were wrapped around himself in a gesture of self-comfort that was universal among his people. "The ruins we found, they weren't just old, they were quarantined, sealed away for a reason." "What do you mean?" Elena asked, though part of her wasn't sure she wanted to know the answer. Shan's large compound eyes reflected the shelter's emergency lighting as he spoke. "The hieroglyphs we translated in the deeper chambers, they weren't celebrating a discovery, they were a warning. Here lies the voice that calls across the void. Here sleeps the hunger that devours light. Let none wake what wisdom is bound. A section of the door suddenly bulged inward, the metal flowing like liquid as the bioacid ate through its molecular structure. The sound it made was obscene, like flesh being torn apart. "We found an artifact," Shen continued, his voice barely audible. "A communication device of some kind. We activated it to study its function. It sent out a signal, one that traveled farther than our instruments could measure. I think it called them here." Elena felt her stomach drop. "You mean this is our fault?" "No," came a new voice from the shelter's comm system. The sound was distorted, processed through some kind of filter, but the words were clear. "This isn't your fault, it's theirs." Every head in the shelter turned toward the communication panel. "Doctor!" Morvain scrambled over to the controls, his clawed hands dancing across the interface. "Who's this?" "Identify yourself. Call sign Ghost Actual. We're here for extraction." "Ghost Actual, this is Dr. Keth Morvain, senior researcher. We show no ships in orbit, no GDF response. Who are you?" There was a pause, filled only by the increasingly urgent sounds of the door being dissolved. Then the voice returned, and Elena could swear she heard something like amusement in it. "We're the cavalry. Stay away from the door." The words had barely finished transmitting when the entire shelter shook as if struck by a meteor. Through the security cameras still functioning on the upper levels, Elena caught a glimpse of something impossible. 6 figures in advanced armor moving through the facility like shadows given deadly purpose. Their weapons fired beams of coherent energy that turned Vrak warriors into clouds of superheated vapor. They moved with inhuman speed and precision, flowing around obstacles and eliminating threats with surgical efficiency. "Impossible," breathed Dr. Trejo, Morvain. "Those suits, that technology, it's decades ahead of anything in the galactic database." Elena found herself thinking of the bedtime stories her grandmother used to tell about the old days when humanity first ventured into space. Stories about mysterious ships that appeared to help vessels in distress, then vanished without explanation. Her fellow researchers had always dismissed such tales as human mythology, but watching these figures move through the facility, she began to wonder. The door to the shelter finally gave way completely, melting into a pool of metallic slag. Through the gap poured a nightmare of chitinous limbs and glowing compound eyes. The first Vrak warrior to enter was nearly 4 meters tall, its bioarmor gleaming with acidic secretions. It paused in the doorway, studying the huddled survivors with calculating intelligence. "Excellent specimens," it hissed, its words bypassing the translator and speaking directly into their minds through bioneural interface.
"The young ones will adapt well to our purposes."
"The adults will provide biomass for expansion." Elena found herself standing, placing her body between the creature and the Altarian child. It was a futile gesture. She was unarmed, untrained, and facing something that could tear her apart without effort. But she couldn't just stand there and watch. The Vrak warrior tilted its head, studying her with something like amusement. "Curious. This one shows protective instincts toward genetic material not her own. Such behavior suggests useful social conditioning. We will study her extensively before conversion." It raised one razor-sharp forelimb, the tip gleaming with paralytic venom. Elena closed her eyes and waited for the strike that would end her resistance. Instead, she heard a sound like thunder compressed into a microsecond. When she opened her eyes, the Vrak warrior was simply gone. Where it had been standing was now a roughly warrior-shaped collection of carbon dust slowly settling to the floor. In the doorway stood a figure in matte black armor, a smoking energy weapon in its hands. "Ma'am," the figure said, its voice distorted by whatever technology was built into its helmet, "we're here to get you out." Elena stared at the armored figure, her mind struggling to process what she was seeing. The suit was clearly advanced technology, but it had lines and proportions that seemed almost familiar, like something designed by and for human physiology. "Who are you?" she asked, though she was beginning to suspect she already knew the answer. "Right now, that's not important," the figure replied, stepping into the shelter. "What's important is getting you and these people somewhere safe. How many wounded?" "Doctor." Morvain stepped forward, his scientific curiosity overriding his fear. "You're human, aren't you?" "But that's impossible. Humanity doesn't have technology like this. Your species only achieved faster-than-light travel 50 years ago." The armored figure paused, and Elena could swear she heard a sigh through the suit's vocal processors. "Doc, respectfully, what you think you know about humanity might be a little out of date. Wilson, Rodriguez, get in here." We've got civilians to move. 2 more figures in identical armor entered the shelter, their weapons trained on the corridor beyond. Elena watched them work with growing amazement. Their movements were too fluid, too precise. The way they coordinated without seeming to communicate suggested neural interfaces or enhanced reflexes that shouldn't have been possible with current galactic technology. 31 survivors confirmed, reported one of the newcomers, Wilson apparently.
6 juveniles, 25 adults. No serious injuries, but they're all running on adrenaline and fear.
Copy that, came the voice of Ghost Actual through their comm systems. Henderson and Torres are clearing the route to the extraction point.
Martinez is providing overwatch from the roof. We've got a narrow window before the VRAC bring in reinforcements. Reinforcements? Dr. Shan spoke up, his compound eyes wide with terror. There are more of them? A lot more. Ghost Actual confirmed grimly. This isn't a raiding party. It's an advanced scout group for a full invasion fleet. We picked up FTL signatures about 10 minutes ago. You've got maybe 6 hours before the system is crawling with hive ships. Eleanor felt her knees go weak. 6 hours? But the nearest GDF fleet isn't coming, Ghost Actual interrupted. Political complications. Something about not wanting to provoke an unknown species without more information. Bureaucrats are happy to let you die while they debate whether helping you might cause diplomatic incidents. The bitter anger in that distorted voice was unmistakable, and it told Eleanor everything she needed to know about who these mysterious rescuers were. Only humans would be that disgusted by galactic politics. Only humans would risk everything to save people they'd never met and might never see again. You're not supposed to be here, she said quietly. Are you? The figure she thought was Ghost Actual turned toward her, and she could feel his attention through the helmet's featureless faceplate. No, ma'am, we're not. But you came anyway. Yes, ma'am, we did. Doctor. Morvain stepped forward again, his scientific mind clearly racing. The implications of this are staggering. If humanity has this level of technology, if you've been operating in secret, save it for the debriefing, Doc. Ghost Actual cut him off. Right now, we need to move. Everyone grab whatever you can carry in 30 seconds, then we're leaving. The VRAC are regrouping, and we've got a long way to go. Elena scooped up the Altarian child, who had stopped whimpering and was now staring at the armored figures with wide, curious eyes. Something about their presence seemed to calm her, as if she instinctively recognized protectors when she saw them. The evacuation was a masterpiece of military precision. The 6 humans, because Elena was now certain that's what they were, moved the survivors through the facility using routes that somehow avoided every VRAC patrol. When they did encounter resistance, it was eliminated so quickly and quietly that most of the civilians didn't even realize combat was taking place. Elena found herself walking beside one of the Marines. She was sure they were Marines now, though she couldn't say how she knew. There was something about the way they moved, the way they coordinated, that spoke of military training refined to an art form. "Can I ask you something?" she said quietly. "Depends on the question," came the reply through the suit's vocal processors. "How long have you been watching us?" "Watching the galaxy, I mean." There was a long pause before the answer came, longer than most people would believe. "We learned early that sometimes the best way to help is to stay hidden. Let people think they're solving their own problems. But you couldn't stay hidden this time. No. This time, the problem was too big, and the politics were too broken. Sometimes you have to choose between staying hidden and doing what's right." Elena adjusted the Altarian child in her arms as they moved through another corridor. "What happens now? After you get us out?" "That depends," the Marine replied, "on a lot of things that are way above my pay grade." They reached what had once been the facility's main hangar, now transformed into something from a nightmare. Black, organic growths covered every surface, pulsing with bioluminescent patterns that hurt to look at directly. The VRAC had been busy, converting the space into some kind of processing center. Elena tried not to think about what they had been processing. "Extraction point is through there," Ghost Actual announced, indicating a section of the hangar where the biogrowth seemed less thick. "Stay close, stay quiet, and do exactly what we tell you. We're about to find out how good these things really are." As they prepared to enter what Elena was certain would be the most dangerous part of their escape, she found herself looking at her mysterious rescuers with new eyes. They had appeared from nowhere, risking everything to save people they had no obligation to protect. They asked for no recognition, no reward, no political advantage. They were, she realized, exactly what she had always hoped humanity could become when it reached for the stars. Not conquerors or exploiters, but guardians. Protectors who watched from the shadows and answered calls for help that no one else would hear. The question was whether the galaxy would be ready for the truth about what humanity had become, and whether humanity was ready to step out of the shadows at last. The answer to both questions, Elena suspected, was about to be decided in the next few hours. The journey through the converted hangar was like walking through the digestive system of some cosmic predator. The bioorganic growths that the Vrak had spread across every surface pulsed with an alien heartbeat, and the air itself seemed thick with microscopic organisms that made Elena's skin crawl. The Altarian child in her arms had gone completely silent, her large eyes darting nervously at every shadow. Staff Sergeant Chen led the group through the nightmare landscape with the confidence of someone who had memorized every detail of the facility's layout. His tactical display showed heat signatures moving through the walls themselves. The Vrak had integrated their biotechnology so completely with the station's infrastructure that the distinction between organism and machine no longer existed. "Contact," whispered Corporal Martinez from her overwatch position. "Multiple signatures converging on your location. Looks like they've figured out we're here." Chen's response was immediate. "Time to extraction? 40 seconds if we move fast." "Copy that. All units, weapons hot. We're about to get loud." The first wave of Vrak warriors emerged from the walls themselves, bursting through the bioorganic growth like deadly flowers blooming in fast motion. These weren't the relatively small scouts they had encountered earlier. These were combat forms, each one over 3 meters tall, and armed with bioweapons that could punch through starship armor. The Marines responded with the kind of coordinated violence that spoke of countless hours of training and combat experience. Their weapons fired streams of coherent energy that turned the charging Vrak into clouds of superheated vapor, but for every warrior they destroyed, 2 more seemed to take its place. Elena found herself pressed against a partially converted cargo container. The Altarian child clutched protectively against her chest as the battle raged around them. The other survivors huddled nearby, their faces reflecting the strobing light of energy weapons and the sickly bioluminescence of the Vrak bioforms. "Wilson, Rodriguez, get those civilians to the extraction point now." Chen's voice cut through the chaos. "Henderson, Torres, covering fire." Elena watched in amazement as the humans fought. They moved like dancers, each one anticipating the other's actions with uncanny precision. When one Marine's weapon ran low on power, another would seamlessly step into their firing position. When Vrak warriors attempted to flank them, the humans shifted their formation like a living thing, always keeping the civilians protected in the center. But Elena could see they were being overwhelmed. For all their advanced technology and tactical superiority, there were simply too many Vrak, and more were arriving every second. "Sir," Wilson's voice carried an edge of panic. "The extraction point is compromised. Vrak have found our ship." Chen's response was immediate and decisive. "Then we make a new one." "Martinez, status on orbital assets?" "Vrak fleet elements are entering the system. I count at least 30 vessels ranging from destroyer to dreadnought class. ETA to orbital bombardment is approximately 90 minutes. Elena felt her heart sink. Even if they escaped the facility, they were trapped in a system that would soon be completely controlled by the enemy. There was nowhere to run. "Sir," came another voice. "Henderson," Elena thought. "We've got company incoming." Big company. Through a gap in the hangar's outer wall, Elena caught sight of something that made her breath catch. Ships were dropping out of hyperspace at the edge of the system. But these weren't the organic, insectoid vessels of the Vrak. These were sleek, predatory craft with lines that suggested both speed and devastating firepower. "Ghost Squadron, this is Ghost Actual." Chen spoke into his communicator. "Sit rep." The response came immediately, and Elena was surprised to hear another human voice. "Ghost Actual, this is Reaper Lead. We've got eyes on 30-plus Vrak capital ships moving in system. Orders are to extract your package and withdraw. Negative, Reaper Lead. We've got civilians down here, and the Vrak are setting up a permanent base. If we leave them here, this system becomes a launching point for the next phase of their expansion."
There was a pause before the pilot responded. "Sir, our orders are specific."
"Extract and withdraw. Engaging the Vrak fleet would blow operational security wide open." Elena could hear the frustration in Chen's voice even through his suit's vocal processors. "Understood, Reaper Lead. Stand by." The Marine turned toward the huddled civilians, and Elena could feel the weight of his decision in the pause that followed. She realized that he was choosing between following orders and doing what he believed was right. The fact that it was even a choice spoke volumes about both the man and the organization he represented. "Change of plans," Chen announced finally.
We're not just extracting, we're eliminating the threat. Sir? Wilson's voice carried a note of uncertainty. Command is going to have our heads. Let me worry about Command, Chen replied grimly. Reaper lead? This is Ghost Actual. New orders. We're going to need fire support on the facility. Full bombardment, surgical strikes only. We'll paint the targets. Sir, that's going to require extended engagement with Vrak fleet assets. There's no way to keep this quiet. I know. Do it anyway.
Eleanor felt a chill run down her spine as she realized what was happening.
These mysterious human guardians were about to reveal themselves to the galaxy, abandoning years or possibly decades of secrecy to protect a group of alien scientists they had never met. The political implications were staggering, but they were willing to face those consequences rather than leave innocent lives in danger.
Dr. Vasquez, Chen said, turning toward her. I need you to listen very carefully. In about 10 minutes, this facility is going to be hit with precision orbital strikes. The Vrak installation will be destroyed, but the process is going to be intense. I need you to keep everyone calm and together.
Elena nodded, though her mind was reeling. What about the Vrak fleet? Leave that to us. As if summoned by his words, the sound of engines filled the hangar as 6 sleek fighters descended through the facility's damaged roof. Elena had seen every type of ship in the Galactic Registry, but these vessels were like nothing she had ever encountered. They moved with an organic fluidity that suggested artificial intelligence of the highest order, and their weapon systems were clearly designed for space superiority combat.
All right, people, Chen announced. Boarding time.
Stay low, move fast, and try not to look down when we launch. The evacuation was carried out with the same precision that had marked everything else about the rescue. Within minutes, all 31 survivors were secured aboard the fighters, with Elena and the Altarian child sharing a seat with one of the Marines. As they lifted off, Elena caught a glimpse of the facility below through the fighters' viewports. The Vrak had turned the research station into something from a nightmare. Black, organic growths covered every surface, and she could see thousands of the creatures moving through the corridors like antibodies in an infected organism. The artifact they had found, the one that had called the Vrak across the void, pulsed with an ominous light at the center of the installation. Target lock confirmed, announced their pilot, beginning bombardment run. What followed was unlike anything Elena had ever seen. The human fighters moved through space with an almost supernatural grace, their weapons reaching out to touch specific points on the facility with surgical precision. Each strike was calculated to cause maximum damage to the Vrak bioforms while preserving the underlying structure, at least until the final phase. Bioneural network is disrupted, reported one of the other pilots. Vrak coordination is breaking down. Copy that, Reaper 3. Beginning Phase 2. The second wave of strikes was different. Instead of precision beams, the fighters unleashed weapons that Elena recognized as fusion warheads, but these were far more advanced than anything in the galactic arsenal. The explosions that followed turned the entire facility into a miniature star for several seconds, and when the light faded, there was nothing left but cooling plasma and debris.
Facility neutralized, reported Reaper lead.
Vrak installation is completely destroyed. But even as Elena watched the death of the nightmare below, her attention was drawn to the larger battle taking place in space around them. The Vrak fleet had arrived in force, and their vessels were unlike anything she had seen in the galactic databases. Each ship was a fusion of technology and biology, their hulls covered in the same black growth that had infected the research station. Against them, humanity had deployed a force that defied every assumption Elena had ever made about human capabilities. Dozens of ships moved through space with the coordinated precision of a single organism, their weapons reaching out to touch Vrak vessels at impossible distances. The technology gap was so vast that it wasn't really a battle, it was more like watching a surgeon remove a cancer. How? She whispered, not really expecting an answer. How what? Asked the Marine sitting beside her. How do you have all this? The ships, the weapons, the technology? Humanity is barely a century old as a spacefaring species. The Marine was quiet for a long moment, watching the battle through the viewport. When he finally spoke, his words carried the weight of secrets that had been kept for decades. What if I told you that humanity's first contact with the galaxy didn't go exactly the way the history books say it did? Eleanor felt her world shift slightly. What do you mean? I mean that when we first ventured out into space, we discovered that the galaxy was a dangerous place. Species that saw newcomers as either threats to be eliminated or resources to be exploited. So, we learned to be careful. We learned to watch and listen before we revealed ourselves. But the contact accords were a carefully orchestrated revelation.
We let the galaxy discover exactly as much about humanity as we wanted them to know. No more, no less. Elena stared at him, the implications crashing over her like waves. You've been here all along, watching, learning, protecting, the Marine corrected. There are threats out there that the galactic government doesn't even know exist. Things like the Vrak, but worse. Humanity appointed itself guardian because no one else was willing or able to do the job. As if to punctuate his words, one of the massive Vrak dreadnoughts simply ceased to exist, torn apart by weapons that seemed to reach through space-time itself. The smaller Vrak vessels began to scatter, but there was nowhere to run. Humanity's ships were faster, more maneuverable, and equipped with technology that treated the laws of physics more like suggestions than absolute rules. The question, the Marine continued, is what happens now? This operation was supposed to be completely covert. Instead, we've just revealed capabilities that are going to change how every species in the galaxy views humanity. Elena looked down at the Altarian child in her arms, who had fallen asleep despite the chaos around them. In her innocence, the child trusted that the adults around her would keep her safe. She had no concept of the political storms that were about to break across the galaxy, or the fundamental shifts in power that were already beginning. Will they be afraid of us? Elena asked. Some will, the Marine admitted. Fear of the unknown is universal. But others, he paused, watching as the last of the Vrak fleet was systematically destroyed. Others might finally understand that they're not alone out here. That someone is watching their backs. As their fighter turned away from the battlefield and headed for what Elena assumed was a human fleet base, she found herself thinking about the future. Humanity had just stepped out of the shadows in the most dramatic way possible, revealing themselves as the galaxy's hidden guardians. The political implications were staggering, but perhaps that was less important than the message they had sent. When the innocent called for help, someone answered. When the darkness came calling, there were those willing to stand against it. The galaxy was about to learn that humanity had been its protector all along. The question was whether the galaxy was ready for that truth. The human fleet base materialized around them like a technological miracle, though Elena suspected that was exactly what it was supposed to be. What had appeared to be empty space suddenly revealed itself as a massive installation, its stealth system so advanced that her fighter's sensors hadn't detected it until they were practically docking. The structure was enormous, easily the size of a small moon, but built with the same sleek, predatory aesthetic as the ships that had rescued them. As their fighter settled into what appeared to be one of hundreds of docking bays, Elena found herself staring through the viewport at the scope of what humanity had built in secret. Ships of every conceivable size and configuration filled the hangars, from single-seat fighters to vessels that dwarfed anything in the galactic fleet. Maintenance crews moved with purposeful efficiency, and everything she could see spoke of an organization that had been operating at this level for decades. "Welcome to Haven Station," said the Marine who had been her escort. "One of humanity's unofficial installations." "How many of these do you have?" Elena asked, her voice barely a whisper. "Enough," came the diplomatic reply. The airlock cycled, and Elena found herself stepping into an environment that was unmistakably human. The architecture, the lighting, even the way the corridors were laid out. Everything spoke of human sensibilities and human engineering, but the technology level was staggering. Gravity plating that worked flawlessly without the massive power requirements of galactic standard systems. Atmospheric processes that seemed to work at the molecular level. Display screens that were somehow embedded in the very walls. Dr. Morvain, walking beside her with his distinctive four-armed gait, was practically vibrating with scientific curiosity. "This is impossible," he muttered, his translator struggling with the rapid-fire Draknari. "The power requirements alone for a facility of this size should require a stellar-level energy source, but I don't detect any of the usual signatures." "Next subject, B." "That's because we don't use the usual methods," said a new voice, and Elena turned to see a woman in what was obviously a command uniform approaching them. She was tall, lean, and carried herself with the kind of confidence that suggested extensive command experience. "Dr. Elena Vasquez. I'm Admiral Sarah Chen, commanding officer of the Third Fleet." Elena shook the offered hand, noting that the Admiral shared a surname with their rescue team leader. "Admiral, I have to ask, how is any of this possible?" "That," Admiral Chen replied with a slight smile, "is exactly what we need to discuss. All of you, actually." "If you'll follow me to the briefing room, I think it's time you learned the truth about humanity's place in the galaxy." The briefing room was large enough to accommodate not just the 31 survivors,
but also what appeared to be the senior staff of the installation. Elena counted at least 50 humans in various uniforms, most of which she didn't recognize. The technology in the room was equally impressive. Holographic displays that seemed to hang in mid-air without any visible projection system, and what appeared to be real-time tactical displays showing ship movements throughout the local sector. Admiral Chen stood at the head of the room, her expression serious. Before we begin, I want you to understand that everything you're about to learn is classified at the highest levels of human government. We're sharing this information with you because circumstances have forced our hand, but also because you have a right to know why your lives were at risk. She gestured, and one of the holographic displays activated, showing a star map of the local galactic arm. 67 years ago, humanity achieved faster-than-light travel and made contact with the galactic community. What the official histories don't tell you is that our first contact wasn't with peaceful explorers or diplomatic missions. The display zoomed in on a specific system, showing what Elena recognized as the Sol system. The hegemony found us first. A survey ship detected the early warp signatures from our test flights and came to investigate. When they found a species that had achieved FTL without their permission or oversight, their response was simple. They ordered Earth's sterilization. Elena felt her breath catch. The official histories spoke of humanity's integration into the galactic community as a peaceful, gradual process. But what Admiral Chen was describing sounded more like a war. Fortunately for us, Chen continued, the survey ship's captain decided to follow protocol and report back to Hegemony Command before taking action. That gave us 18 days to prepare for what we knew was coming. The display shifted, showing Earth surrounded by what appeared to be a small fleet of primitive human vessels. 18 days to build our first real warships. 18 days to develop weapons that could threaten vessels with technology centuries ahead of ours. 18 days to either prove we deserve to exist or die trying. Morvain leaned forward, his compound eyes reflecting the holographic display. But the records showed that first contact was peaceful. The Treaty of Alpha Centauri was signed after we destroyed 3 hegemony dreadnoughts and forced the rest of their fleet to retreat. Chen interrupted. The treaty was their attempt to save face after getting bloodied by a species they'd dismissed as primitive. Elena's mind was reeling. But that would mean that humanity has been lying to the galaxy for over 60 years, Chen confirmed. We let them think we were the harmless newcomers, eager to learn and grateful for their guidance. In reality, we were studying them, learning their weaknesses, and preparing for the next time someone decided we didn't deserve to exist. The display changed again, showing ship designs that were clearly evolutionary developments from those early human warships. Over the decades, we've built a shadow fleet. Ships that don't appear on any official registry, bases that exist in interstellar space where no one thinks to look, and technology that's advanced far beyond anything the galactic community possesses. One of the other survivors, a Centauri engineer named Baxtorian, spoke up. The implications of this are staggering. If humanity has been operating with this level of technology for decades, why maintain the deception? Admiral Chen's expression grew grim, because the galaxy isn't ready for the truth about what's out there. The Vrak are just the latest threat. Over the past 60 years, we've documented 17 different species or entities that posed existential threats to galactic civilization. Most of them never made it past our early warning systems. Early warning systems? Elena asked. Monitoring stations in the void between galaxies. Sensor networks that watch for signs of extragalactic intrusion. Automated defense platforms that can respond to threats before they reach inhabited systems. Chen gestured, and the display showed a vast network of installations stretching out beyond the galactic rim. Humanity has essentially appointed itself the galaxy's immune system. Dr. Shan Kirel, who had been silent throughout the briefing, finally spoke. The artifact we found on Kepler, 442b. You knew about it, didn't you? Chen nodded grimly. We've been monitoring that site for 23 years. When your expedition arrived, we hoped that civilian researchers might succeed where our people had failed, that fresh perspectives might unlock the artifact's secrets without triggering its defensive systems. Defensive systems? Elena felt a chill run down her spine. You mean the signal that called the Vrak? The artifact isn't a communication device, Chen explained. It's a warning beacon, left behind by a species that fought the Vrak millions of years ago. When activated, it sends out a distress signal that attracts the Vrak. But it also contains information about their weaknesses and tactical patterns. We needed that information. The room fell silent as the implications sank in. Elena found her voice first. You used us as bait. Yes, Chen admitted without hesitation.
And I won't insult your intelligence by pretending otherwise.
But we also ensured that help was close enough to respond when the trap was sprung. Every expedition to that site has been shadowed by one of our rapid response teams. Elena felt anger rising in her chest. People died. Good people.
Scientists who were just trying to expand our understanding of the universe.
Yes, they did,
Chen acknowledged.
And their deaths have given us intelligence that will save millions more lives. The Vrak invasion fleet that was destroyed today was just the advance guard. The real fleet, the one with enough ships to consume this entire spiral arm, is still coming. But now we know how to fight them. The Admiral gestured again, and the display showed what appeared to be a massive fleet of dark, organic vessels moving through the void between galaxies. Long-range sensors detected them 18 months ago. Without the tactical data from that artifact, we would have been fighting blind. Now we have a chance. Dr. Morvan stood up, his forearms gesturing in a pattern that Elena recognized as extreme agitation. This is monstrous. You've manipulated galactic civilization for decades, used innocent researchers as expendable assets, and hidden the existence of existential threats from the very people you claim to be protecting.
Yes, Chen replied simply.
All of that is true. We've lied, manipulated, and sacrificed lives to keep the galaxy safe from threats it couldn't even comprehend. We've built a shadow empire dedicated to fighting wars that no one else can fight, using methods that no one else would approve of. We are, by any reasonable definition, exactly the kind of threat that galactic civilization should fear. She paused, looking around the room at the shocked faces of the survivors. But we're also the reason that galactic civilization still exists. Every species represented in this room is alive because humanity has spent 60 years fighting monsters in the dark. Eleanor found herself thinking of the Altarian child, now sleeping peacefully in one of the facility's guest quarters. What happens now? Do we go back to pretending none of this ever happened? That, Chen said, is no longer possible. The engagement at Kepler 442b was witnessed by dozens of Vrak vessels that escaped the battle. Word of humanity's true capabilities is already spreading through their communication networks. Within days, every major species in the galaxy will know that humans have been hiding technology that makes their most advanced ships look like toys. The implications were staggering. Elena could already imagine the political chaos that would result when the galactic community learned they had been living under the protection of a species they had dismissed as relatively primitive newcomers. There will be fear, Chen continued. Terror, even. Some species will demand that humanity's shadow fleet be disbanded. Others will try to steal our technology. A few might even try to form alliances against us, convinced that we represent a threat to galactic stability. And how will humanity respond? Asked Dr. Mark Morvain. Chen's smile was cold and sharp. The same way we've always responded. We'll do whatever it takes to protect innocent lives, regardless of what anyone thinks about our methods or our right to exist. Eleanor found herself looking at Admiral Chen with new eyes. This woman and the organization she represented had spent decades making impossible decisions in impossible circumstances. They had sacrificed their own moral clarity to keep the galaxy safe, becoming the very thing they fought against in order to fight it effectively. Will you keep us here? Elena asked. To protect your secrets? No, Chen replied. You're free to go, with our thanks for your service. But you should understand that your lives have been changed by what you've learned today. The galaxy is going to be a very different place in the coming months, and the knowledge you possess will make you valuable to many different factions. Elena thought about that, weighing the implications. Will you protect us? If you want our protection, you'll have it. But that protection comes with a price. You'll be under our watch for the rest of your lives, and we'll expect your cooperation when we need it. Dr. Morvain stood again, his expression thoughtful. And if we choose to refuse your protection? If we decide to reveal what we've learned here? Chen's expression didn't change. Then you'll be on your own in a galaxy that's about to become very dangerous very quickly. Elena found herself thinking about the future, about the political upheavals that were coming, and about the roles she might play in them. The knowledge she possessed could change the course of galactic history, but it also made her a target for every faction that wanted to use or suppress that knowledge. In the end, the choice was simple. She looked around the room at her fellow survivors, seeing the same realization in their eyes. They had been given a glimpse behind the curtain of galactic politics, and there was no going back. The galaxy was about to learn that humanity had been its secret guardian all along. The question was whether that revelation would bring the species together or tear them apart. Elena suspected they were about to find out. 3 months after the Kepler 442b incident, Elena Vasquez stood before the emergency session of the Galactic Council on Concordia Prime, holding a data pad that contained enough classified information to reshape the political landscape of known space. Around her, representatives from 47 different species filled the ancient amphitheater, their various forms of agitation creating a cacophony of clicks, chirps, growls, and electronic tones that the translation matrices struggled to process. She had chosen to come forward, as had most of the other survivors. The weight of the secret had proven too heavy to bear, especially as reports began filtering in of mysterious ship sightings and unexplained military actions throughout the Outer Rim territories. Humanity's shadow war was becoming increasingly difficult to hide, and Elena had decided that the galaxy deserved to know the truth about their hidden guardians. "The evidence is undeniable," declared Chancellor Vex Meridian, the hegemony's chief representative, his crystalline form refracting the chamber's lighting into prismatic patterns. "Humanity has been operating a parallel military structure for decades, one that possesses technology far in advance of anything in the galactic database. The question before us is not whether this is true, but what we do about it." Elena watched the council's reaction as her testimony was disseminated through the chamber's information networks. The holographic displays showed fleet movements, technological analyses, and tactical assessments that painted a picture of humanity as either the galaxy's secret protector or its greatest potential threat, depending on one's perspective. Ambassador Keth Valarian of the Centauri Federation rose to speak, his 6 arms gesturing in the complex patterns that indicated formal diplomatic address. "Dr. Vasquez has presented compelling evidence that humanity has been conducting covert operations to protect galactic civilization from external threats. However, the methods described, deception, manipulation, unauthorized military action, these raise serious questions about human intentions and galactic sovereignty." "Sovereignty?" The voice cut through the diplomatic chatter like a blade, and Elena turned to see a figure she recognized entering the chamber. Admiral Sarah Chen, still in her human fleet uniform, walked with the confident stride of someone who had nothing left to hide. "You want to talk about sovereignty, Ambassador Valerian? Let's talk about the hegemony's sovereignty when they decided Earth should be sterilized for the crime of achieving FTL travel." A collective gasp rippled through the chamber. The official histories had never mentioned any conflict during humanity's first contact, and the implications of Chen's statement sent shockwaves through the assembled delegates. Chancellor Meridian's form flickered with what Elena had learned to recognize as extreme agitation. "These are serious accusations, Admiral. Do you have evidence to support such claims?" "I have the sensor logs from 3 hegemony dreadnoughts," Chen replied calmly, producing a data crystal, "including the last transmission from Captain Zek the Lonan, ordering orbital bombardment of civilian population centers. I also have the debris analysis from the ships we destroyed in response." The chamber erupted into chaos as the political implications hit home. If humanity had been attacked during first contact and had successfully defended themselves, it cast their subsequent deception in an entirely different light. Elena watched as delegates began demanding access to their government's classified first contact files, no doubt hoping to find evidence that would either support or refute Chen's claims. "Order!" boomed the Council Prime, a massive titan whose gravitic voice field could impose silence on even the most unruly gathering. "Admiral Chen, by what authority do you address this body?" "By the authority of someone who has spent the last 60 years keeping all of you alive," Chen replied without hesitation. "By the authority of every human who has died fighting threats you never even knew existed. By the authority of a species that chose to guard the galaxy instead of conquering it." Elena found herself admiring the Admiral's courage. Chen had to know that revealing herself to the Galactic Council was political suicide. Humanity would never be able to return to the shadows now. But she had come anyway, determined to tell her story before others could tell it for her. "The Vrak incursion at Kepler 442b was the 16th extragalactic threat we've documented in the past 40 years, Chen continued, her words carrying the weight of absolute conviction. Each one required immediate response, because each one possessed the capability to end galactic civilization before your governments could even convene emergency sessions to discuss the threat. She gestured, and holographic displays materialized around the chamber, showing encounters with species and entities that existed in no galactic database. Elena recognized some of them from the briefings at Haven Station. Nightmarish beings of living energy, mechanical swarms that consumed entire star systems,
and predators that existed partially outside normal space-time. The Shardik Collective consumed 17 systems in the Outer Rim before we developed weapons capable of disrupting their hive mind, Chen explained as the displays showed the aftermath of battles fought in absolute secrecy. The entropy rates would have unraveled local space-time if we hadn't contained their dimensional incursion. The machine gods were building a galactic-scale harvesting array before we convinced them that organic life might be worth preserving. Elena watched the faces, or facial equivalents, of the assembled delegates as they processed the scope of what humanity had been dealing with in secret. Some showed fear, others skepticism, but she could see the growing realization that the evidence was too extensive and too detailed to be fabricated.
Dr. Randon Union.
Morvain, who had chosen to testify alongside Elena, stood to address the chamber. I have personally examined the technological artifacts recovered from these encounters, he said, his forearms gesturing to emphasize his points. The materials alone represent advances in physics that would take centuries to develop through normal research. The tactical data suggests engagement with entities possessing capabilities far beyond anything in our current understanding of the universe. And yet, interrupted Ambassador Thaler Corsin of the Synthetic Collective, her artificial form processing data at visible speeds, humanity chose to keep all of this secret. They built a shadow empire, developed technology that could threaten any species in the galaxy, and conducted military operations without oversight or accountability. How are we to trust beings capable of such deception? Chen's expression hardened. Because the alternative was watching you all die while your governments debated whether responding to existential threats might violate someone's territorial sovereignty. How many Galactic Council emergency sessions would it take to authorize action against an entity that could consume a star system in 6 hours? The question hung in the air, and Elena could see delegates calculating response times and bureaucratic delays. The uncomfortable truth was that the galactic government's decision-making process was designed for stability and consensus, not rapid response to cosmic-scale threats. The human approach may have been effective, acknowledged Prime Designate Xerion of the Crystalline Dominion, his mineral form resonating with harmonic overtones, but it was also fundamentally undemocratic. Humanity made decisions that affected all our species without consultation or consent. Because consultation and consent would have gotten you killed, Chen shot back. Democracy is a luxury that requires survival. We chose to ensure your survival first and worry about the political ramifications later. Elena stepped forward, feeling the weight of the moment. If I may, she said, and the chamber's attention focused on her. I've spent the last 3 months reviewing everything that Admiral Chen has shared with us. The classified files, the tactical reports, the technological analyses. The scope of what humanity has been doing in secret is staggering, but so is the scope of what they've been protecting us from. She activated her own datapad, projecting a timeline that showed the correlation between hidden human operations and periods of unusual stability in galactic civilization. Look at this pattern. Every time the galactic community faced a crisis that should have led to widespread conflict or collapse, something intervened to prevent the worst-case scenario. Trade disputes that should have escalated to war suddenly found peaceful resolutions. Technological developments that should have destabilized the balance of power somehow failed to spread beyond their creators. Exploration missions that should have encountered hostile entities instead found empty space. The implications were clear, and Elena could see understanding dawn on the faces around her. Humanity hasn't just been fighting external threats. They've been managing internal ones as well, preventing wars, containing dangerous technologies, eliminating threats before they could develop into galaxy-spanning crises. You're describing a shadow government, accused Chancellor Meridian. An organization that manipulates galactic civilization without accountability. We're describing guardians, Elena replied firmly. People who sacrificed their own moral clarity to keep the rest of us safe. People who chose to bear the burden of impossible decisions so that the rest of us could sleep peacefully. The debate continued for hours, but Elena could sense the tide turning. Fear was gradually giving way to understanding, as the assembled delegates processed the full scope of what humanity had been doing. The evidence was too overwhelming, the threats too real, and the results too effective to dismiss. Finally, the Council Prime called for order. Admiral Chen, the Titan's gravitational voice boomed. What does humanity want from this revelation? What do your people hope to gain by abandoning the shadows? Chen's answer was immediate and absolute. We want to stop lying to people we're trying to protect. We want to stop making decisions in isolation that affect the entire galaxy. We want partners instead of charges, allies instead of responsibility. She paused,
looking around the chamber at the assembled representatives of galactic civilization. The next VRAC fleet will arrive in approximately 8 months. It will consist of over 15,000 vessels, each one capable of consuming a planet-sized mass in less than a day. The technology we've developed can stop them, but not without cost. We need the galaxy to understand what's coming and to choose how it wants to face that threat. The chamber fell silent as the weight of that statement settled over the delegates. Elena realized that this had never been about political revelation or moral accountability. It had been about preparation for the greatest threat galactic civilization had ever faced. "What do you need from us?" asked Ambassador Valarian finally. "Everything," Chen replied simply. "Manufacturing capacity, resource allocation, personnel, research cooperation. We need every species working together to prepare for what's coming. The age of fighting in the shadows is over. The age of open warfare is about to begin." Elena felt a chill run down her spine as she realized the scope of what Admiral Chen was describing. Humanity had revealed themselves not because they wanted recognition or political power, but because they needed help. The threats they had been facing in secret had grown beyond what any single species could handle alone. "And if we refuse?" asked Chancellor Meridian. Chen's smile was cold and tired. "Then in 8 months you'll face the largest invasion fleet in galactic history with nothing but standard GDF equipment and good intentions. I'll let you calculate those odds yourself." The vote, when it came, was unanimous. Every species, every faction, every political entity represented in the chamber agreed to the emergency mobilization protocols. They would pool their resources, share their technology, and prepare for war under human guidance. As Elena watched the delegates file out of the chamber, already making urgent communications to their home governments, she found herself thinking about the future. Humanity had stepped out of the shadows at last, but they had done so not as conquerors or manipulators, but as leaders preparing for humanity's greatest challenge. The galaxy was about to learn what humanity had always known: that sometimes the greatest act of love was being willing to fight for those who couldn't fight for themselves. In 8 months, that principle would be tested on a scale never before imagined. Elena only hoped they would all survive to see the results. The Xenos had called for rescue, and the humans had answered from the shadows. Now, in the full light of galactic attention, they would discover whether their answer had been strong enough to save everyone they had sworn to protect.